Welcome back to another episode of the Basalon Cycling Show. I'm your host Sherry. Ever wonder what to do when things get difficult during a cycling adventure or an ultra race? Stay tuned till the end to find out more. And this month, in the world of Basin news, we have some pretty interesting results from races like Transpyrenees, where Robbie Gampelet took the win, being the first rider to take the win in both Transcontinental Race and Transpyrenees in the same year. It was a race full of excitement. It's a self-routed one, and some of the riders took the hiking trail called Bujarelo in the Pyrenees. I did it myself during one of my first races, Transiberica, and it was very challenging. So make sure to check out the video to see all the action. And in the Arizona Trail, Justinas took the win. Wow, it was an impressive ride. He was actually in the Basalon podcast a few months ago. So make sure to check out the podcast. And we have upcoming events like Across Andes in Chile, which is definitely one in my bucket list, and I'm looking forward to see how it goes. It looks really beautiful, so I hope to do it one day. This month, we have a special guest, ultracyclist and adventurer, Chris Hall. Welcome to the show, Chris.
Thank you for having me. It was lovely to receive an invite, to be honest with you. I think people need to buckle down and realise that I can talk too much.
Yeah, it was really cool and brief meeting during Badlands this year. Definitely a challenging event. I'm really curious to hear your experience. I've seen something on YouTube, but maybe you can give us a bit more insights. You've done the event, I don't know, 3, 4 times. Why you keep coming back?
So this would have been this. I've started 4 times. Let's say that.
Mhm.
I this year, just to be frank, to have done that race 3 times and have had no problems, like not even a puncture, is pretty incredible. And like you'll know, like in any form of like ultra races, they're as much about like problem solving as they are actually doing the race, and it's trying to alleviate any potential issues and problems. Now, I did 2020, 2021, 2022. That's not right. I did 2021, 2022, 2023, and then this year would be 2024. I did have a place for the first edition in 2020, but that was COVID times, and in the UK it was really, really hard to actually get out of the country, and I don't know, it just didn't feel right to be traveling around that sort of time, so I didn't do it. But I've done every other edition since. I still think, even though this year didn't go how I would have liked it to have gone, I still think that the 2021 edition was the hardest edition.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. But and it was because there was like the route was basically changed quite a lot from the first edition. So originally you could ride up Piccoboletta. That was the first edition. You finished on Piccoboletta, and from then onwards, they basically the police got involved and sort of said, like, we don't want people riding up there at night because it could be quite sketchy.
Yeah.
I mean, the rest of the race has points where you like, should you be riding this at night? But anyway, they so the police sort of said that to David they couldn't finish at Piccoboletta, so they basically replanned the route and made it harder for 2021 because they're like, oh, we've lost out on that climb. Let's just make the whole race a bit tougher.
Yeah.
And I think they went and sort of turned it up to like 11 or 12 in terms of toughness.
Oh, wow.
And then on the combination of the route being quite tricky, like the sections through Tabernas were a lot harder. The beach hiker bike section, which I think this year was maybe like a kilometer, maybe 2K.
Yeah, it was short.
Yeah, in 2021 it was like 15K, that beach section. Yeah. And there was a lot of sections where you'd be on a road, especially as you start going towards the coast, you'd be on a road and then you'd turn off onto a gravel trail, do like a couple of K loop, and then you'd join back onto the road, maybe 100 meters further down.
Yeah.
There was a lot of that. Also, the temperatures in 21 were sort of 40 degrees. So it was kind of about survival more than anything. And then this year, I've had a lot. Well, I say a bit of bad luck. I've had a lot of bad luck this year, which is fine. It happens, part of the game. But I've had a couple of operations to fix various broken body parts from years of abusing my body, shall we say?
Cycling related or
some cycling related, some previous sporting adventure related. I used to play rugby, so rugby really hurts.
Yeah.
So a few old rugby injuries that have kind of persisted and come back to haunt me, shall we say. The irony is I was like told to cycle to basically help rehabilitate rugby injuries, and then and that kind of worked for quite a long time, and then it's just I've had like a bit of a resurface from them. So yeah, it was this year's just been a bit tricky in terms of I've had 3 operations to fix various things, which each one of them you think there's like a good month to recover from. And then Badlands this year, I wasn't feeling particularly confident or anything, but I know the race, so I probably have the most experience of anyone in that event. I know the event so well, which is good and a bad thing. And what I mean by that is like it's good because I know the route. Yes, it changes every year, but I know roughly the whole route and the sections, and I've ridden around those areas of Spain a lot. But the bad thing is because I know it, I know what's next and what's the next part is. So this year I actually was the most calmest I think I've ever been for anything. I felt very relaxed, which is a lovely situation to be in because I'm not very good at being relaxed. I get very stressed out and a bit I don't know, nervous. I get nervous. I was really chilled, and then I remember starting and something didn't feel right very early on. I wasn't really sure what, but something didn't feel right. Like I was really struggling to cool down. Very, very sweaty, like soaked sweaty, and then progressively struggling to eat, and then struggling to drink. And I kind of gave myself one goal was to get to a particular town where there's a bar, and every year I've gone and hung out with the owners. Like I don't speak very good Spanish, they don't speak very good English, and we just somehow communicate and bond in a really lovely way. And I made a point of seeing them every single year that I've done it, and I've also visited them outside of Badlands, just gone to go and see them because they're really nice people. And there's a Villanueva de la Torres, I think is the town. Small town, in the Garrafe Loop. And they gave me a bottle of Coca-Cola. Like I turned up and I think they quite instantly knew I was not great. And they were like, "Oh, let's give you have a bocadillo, have some drink and all this kind of stuff." And I was like, "I appreciate it, but it's not going to stay down." So I carried on riding, as you do, and started to feel even more worse. And then just I started being sick, quite severely sick actually. And that to me is not a good sign. I think some people maybe in the ultra racing kind of go, "Oh, you can ride through that kind of thing." But I'm old now, right? I've been doing this a long time, and I kind of know. I kind of have got to that point where a friend of mine said to me, "There's Emily Chappell, actually, and another friend, Mark Beaumont. They both said to me, Chris, you have nothing to prove to anyone anymore." And I was like, coming from those two, that's a really lovely thing to be told. And it reminded me that actually I don't have anything to prove to anyone. I'm doing this for fun. I was supposed to actually be doing it as a pair originally this year, but my pair pulled out very, very last minute, like 3 or 4 days before the race. So that was quite stressful. But yeah, I was sick several times, and I was riding a lot slower than I would have liked to have been riding, and I knew something wasn't right because I wasn't been able to eat, I wasn't been able to drink. So I decided to get some sleep and just see how I felt in the morning. Slept for maybe 4 hours, woke up the next morning, was instantly sick, and I just kind of made it my objective then to get to Gore.
And that's a lovely town.
It's a lovely place, right? and then from Gore to kind of decide what I was going to do from there. I actually ended up sleeping around a couple of friends, which was really nice. It's nice to have that kind of support. Because I was not very well, and I have a really good friend who was in the SAS, so very, very, very hardcore man. And he called me up and he was like, "How you doing? You know, he's quite blunt. He's like, I was kind of expecting you to be further than you are by now, but how are you? How are you feeling? All that kind of thing." And I was like, "Yeah, I'm not good." And he was like, "What's up?" And I explained to him the situation. He just went, "You've got heat stroke," like blunt as anything.
Yeah,
and I was like, "Okay." And he was like, "What's the temperatures like this year? Like, is it hotter? What's it like compared to previous years?" I was like, I said to him, "It's actually cooler, but the humidity was really high."
Yeah.
The humidity was more like the humidity we have in the UK, but the temperatures were cooler, but still a lot hotter than the UK. So as I said earlier, I just was soaked in sweat, absolutely soaked. And I think when you get to that point, your body can't cool down. You're not getting enough salt in. You're not getting enough liquid in. And I'd been sick several times and was just not really being able to eat. So my mate said to me, "I know people that have died of heat stroke. It's really, really serious. You need to understand how serious it is." And I think, especially in the UK, we have a real, I guess, misconception of how serious heat stroke is. I mean, we're a country of people that doesn't really take sunscreen seriously, doesn't really take anything involving the heat very seriously, because we don't get very hot temperatures most of the year, right? It's like our summer is usually 3 days a year.
I can relate with that in the Netherlands,
Is
even
exactly
though
the
I'm from
same.
Colombia.
Yeah, same thing, right? So I did listen to him, obviously, and he just said to me, like, get into some shade, like get to a town, and then decide what you want to do from there, basically. And I was riding towards Gore, and there was a man who was on the you might have seen him, called Danny, who was on the side of the road, who had a like a hotel just outside of Gore.
Ah, yes, they were
Yeah.
super nice. I was there at night and they were like outside with their kids and cheering on. I was really happy I had time to interact with them, because normally in the races I'm so focused on going fast, but Badlands I took it more chill and I really enjoyed meeting all the people, and I remember they were super friendly. Yeah.
That and that's what's so special about Badlands, is the community aspect of it. And when I'm talking about community, I don't just mean the community of riders. Like, there's a reason why people go back year after year, right? But I also mean the community and support from the towns, the villages. That, like, the first year I did this, people had no idea what was going on. They're like, "Why are there all these weird, dusty, muddy, lycra-clad people turning up on bicycles?" But then every year you've seen how the towns and villages have got more and more behind it. And this year, from the parts that I did ride, I noticed it had gone up again. Like, seeing in Gore, they had banners up, they had all the signs, and they had the bar was open for 24 hours a day. Like, they'd really upped their game. And
they even had showers and public places to sleep. I was like, wow, that feels like PvP a bit. Gave me that feeling of like, they go an extra mile, and it's really kind of their Tour of France kind of thing. You
exactly.
really feel like a star riding through the villages.
It's like you've got the Coravan shop, the little shop in Gore, and the shop owner. He's been there every year, and I've always spoken to him every year, and I've got funny memories of sitting outside that shop and eating random food with various people that I've met on the route. And, like, one of the highlight ones was sitting there with Taylor Finney 2 years ago, and we'd ridden together for about 200k through the desert. And I watch all the cycling. I watch everything. I love absorbing cycling as a sport. And Taylor Finney was always one of my favorite riders. And we got riding in the desert, and now I feel very lucky to be able to say he's a friend. And we sat outside that shop, and he bought some bread and some, like, you get that, like, processed meat. I'm vegetarian, so it's not my bag really, but that processed meat that's like flat and square, like slices.
No,
And it's
I'm not familiar with that. I just rush in and take some Haribo. I already have my go-to.
you done the right thing. Taylor went in there and got this like chicken slices, and he just
Ooh.
stood there and he went, "What part of the chicken is this from?" And it's like a square flat thing. And at
You
the
don't want to
time,
know.
yeah, I just said to him, we're both quite tired, and I was like, "The square part." And then that has become a bit of a recurring joke since whenever we sort of bump into each other, basically. But yeah, like what's lovely about that shopkeeper is he is amazed about where people have come from around the
Mm-hmm.
world. Like, because he would always ask, "Oh, where are you from?" to people that come in. And I remember David was telling me a story that that shopkeeper was like, "I had a person in my shop today from like America, from Los
Yeah.
Angeles," and I couldn't believe it. And like little things like that shows the success of the event, right? And
Mm-hmm.
but anyway, for me this year, I got heat stroke, summing it all up, and made the decision to pull out in Gore as opposed to continuing,
Mm-hmm.
because heat stroke's really dangerous. And if it to be honest, it took me maybe a month to kind of feel okay again.
Yeah,
I didn't
that's quite
realize how
interesting.
Yeah, I
Mm-hmm.
didn't realize how serious it is.
Mm-hmm.
But it was the right decision to make. It's a shame. I would have loved to have done more, but it's what it is. To have done, finished 3 times and
Mm-hmm.
not have had any issues, and then to have, my pair pull out last minute, and then the heat stroke, like maybe my pair pulling out made me kind of go, well, this isn't what I was originally here for. But ultimately, the most important thing is listening to your body, and that was 100% the right decision that I made that time. I was
Yeah,
pretty upset about it.
sometimes it's difficult to take the decision of scratching. I think the mental aspect of ultracycling is something that people know is there, but is really actually important. How do you balance this? I mean, when you started your journey, I think you made a lot of emphasis on like bringing awareness to mental health. But
Mm-hmm.
how is the impact of ultra races, because sometimes you have really tough moments, sometimes it's difficult to take decisions of should I scratch or feeling a bit the pressure, as you
Mm.
said, your friends told you you have nothing to prove, but sometimes you are in these races, you should not keep going, but there's something there like, oh, what if I scratch? Or sometimes you feel the outside pressure. Have you felt that maybe impacted you in a certain way? Or how you enjoy the long distance events, you still feel like whatever brought you into the sport, into doing these kind of events?
I think like there is no, as I worked out this year that I've been doing ultra stuff for 10 years. That's a long
Wow.
time.
Yeah.
And the first thing I ever did was I rode the first. I class it as an ultra because in terms of my fitness and how new I was into cycling, and it was, for me, everyone classes ultra as a different thing, right? I always say
Hmm.
500k plus. That's what
Yeah.
I class as an ultra. So the first thing I ever did was I rode around Richmond Park in London for 24 hours, and
Hmm.
that would have been just going up for 10 years ago now, and that was to fundraise for a children's school called the Pace Centre, which looks after kids with cerebral palsy. I've got
Hmm.
a friend who's got a kid there. I've got a nephew that's gone there. It's a very
Hmm.
important charity to me. And then the other side of the stuff I do is I do a lot of fundraising for Movember, and that comes down to sort of mental health awareness. And yes, there's a inherent relationship with men and male mental health awareness there, but they do support everyone with mental health
Hmm.
awareness and provide a lot of really useful information. I think when I started, the first big, I guess, ultra race I did, because a lot of the stuff I did early on wasn't so much ultra races, it was more like big challenges focused around fundraising for charities and causes that meant something to me. But
Hmm.
the first ultra I actually did was Silk Road Mountain Race.
Oh.
And yeah, the first edition of Silk Road, and I did it as a pair with my mate Rob Quirk, who is an incredibly talented frame builder. So check him out. I don't mind plugging him because he's my mate. Based in London, builds beautiful still frames. And we basically, the pair of us were testing 2 different bikes for him to build. And then whatever kind of won the test was going to become a production bike that he would then produce as a custom still frame. I rode one that was basically a cyclocross bike, and he rode, not the bike for Silk Road. No. And he rode one that was like a monster cross, like mountain bike tires, had Lauf suspension forks, and that actually ended up becoming the production one that he made. But
he should have given you this one to test instead of the cyclocross.
Yeah, I mean, at the time I was racing cyclocross, so it kind of it was kind of what I was used to, and it fitted quite nicely in terms of what I was used to riding. But I honestly, if anyone's doing Silk Road on a drop bar bike, unless it's a drop bar mountain bike, I would consider changing your choice of bike. And that's just Nelson's races as they've developed have become so much more mountain bikey, and I actually don't think being a good cyclist is key to those races. It's being a good outdoors adventure person is the key to Nelson's races.
Yeah, that's actually interesting because I'm planning to sign up for the Atlas mountain race. So that's some good feedback there.
Atlas is I find Atlas hard. Like first year I rode it on a gravel bike, and it was okay, but I think I had 11 punctures in the first year. Yeah.
Wow.
And then the second year I rode it on a hardtail, and I got pneumonia the second time I did it. So
the altitude maybe and the cold.
Well, it was -7 in the mountains. So I ended up scratching out of that one. And I don't know, I think with scratching, as I've got older, it's part of it. Like, it's not a bad thing. It's actually absolutely fine. Most people aren't paid to do these kind of things. You're doing it by choice, right? And so you have to think of it long term. Like, if you're going to affect your long term health, is it worth continuing? And as I've got older, especially, I've just gone, no, it's not. Like, it really isn't. Like, I've definitely made decisions when I was younger where I probably shouldn't have I should have stopped and kind of gone, that's not a good thing to do. Like, the one that always springs to my mind is there was a race called the Indy Pack, which was across Australia, and unfortunately for I think for good reasons is not happening anymore. I won't go too much into that, but me and my best mate, we actually basically rode the Indy Pack route as a adventure together, and we did it and went across Australia, and that was in 2019. And just before doing that, I think 2 or 3 weeks before doing that, I got hit by a truck. So I damaged all the nerves in my hand, and then went and rode across Australia. And the nerve damage in my hand during that trip, it got to a point where, you'll be able to relate to this, the motion of opening a packet of Haribo.
or getting yourself locking in the bathroom because you cannot.
Yeah, but it's that kind of motion, right? Yeah, it's like a pinch to open a packet. Now, I can't actually do that anymore. I can't do that. I don't have the grip in my hand to do that from being hit by a truck and then riding across Australia. So I didn't give my hands the time to recover properly, and then the continual, spending we did it in 20 days in the end, and we sort of darted around the Indy Pack route and kind of did a bit of exploring as well. But it was 20 days of riding, and they were big days on the bike because the distance we were riding was the distances between motels, effectively. So that could have been 200k, could be 250k. But you think you're on drop bars the whole time, and that continual position has basically killed off the nerves in my left hand. So that's an example of where I probably shouldn't have done that, and probably actually I'd have a hand that still works properly. And that's, in my mind, that's where you go, okay, yes, it's not an ultra, but you still scratch, pull out of it, right? If I had more correctly decided to delay that trip, or not do it or whatever, maybe I'd actually be able to use my left hand properly again. But now, for the rest of my life, this will be a problem. And
I think hands is the one that takes the most to recover. Also, when I have an ultra, everything kind of recovers after a month or two, but the hands like a half a year and still don't have the gripping strength anymore.
And like for me, the problem I prefer off-road events to road ones. I just enjoy them more, feel more safe. I like that you will see stuff that you wouldn't be able to see if you were in a car. I like that. I really like that experience. I like the remoteness of it. Like Atlas, for example, one of the biggest things for me that I really took away from Morocco is how incredible the sunrises and sunsets are. You wouldn't see that in a car because you need to be in the middle of nowhere to experience that and wake up to it. So I do prefer the off-road stuff, but the off-road stuff definitely takes longer to recover from and I find anyway with my hands, I have to overcompensate in terms of grip. So I have to wear gloves because I can't. I need grippy gloves because if I don't, I can't actually grip onto the shifters properly. And I've had to like accommodate my fit on the bike quite significantly to allow me to not be putting weight into my hands so much, to basically allow my left hand to be able to do as much as it can. And similarly, I can't ride like a mechanical cable group set because that motion, I can't do it. I can't do it. Like electronic is fine because it's just a tap, tap, tap. But the motion of like a mechanical one where you have to push it in, I can't do it. So I think because of all from experience, I think scratching is part of it and it's absolutely natural and fine. And if you have to, you shouldn't feel ashamed in it. It really doesn't matter. Like in all honesty, I can maybe remember who's won most of the events I've been at, maybe, but I couldn't tell you who was the top 10. Like, a finish is a finish, and that's amazing. But also, if you don't finish and you've got an experience and a story from it, that's also incredible. If you've gained something that's benefited you and allowed you to grow as a person, even if that means you haven't finished, it's a success. And that's how people need to look at it. I think there's a very negative opinion of scratching and it needs to change because it's not a negative thing. If you've gained something, you've still started. You're ahead of thousands of other people. You've committed to starting, and that's incredible. There's many people who wouldn't even dare to commit to it. So it's a success.
Yeah, I think so. That's really interesting. It also relates to the question of this month, which is like, are we focusing too much on results on ultra races? I mean, it's not, as you said, you don't have prize money. It's not a professional sport per se. So people, sometimes I'm guilty myself, like we focus too much of who is leading or who won, but maybe you miss out when you focus too much on result or what is really worthy about it, the journey, and what you said, what you take away from the experience. If you focus sometimes too much on a result, you lose sight of what is around you or enjoying the landscapes, as you mentioned, the sunrises, the sunset, because you think, oh, I'm not in the top 5, so why I'm here? It's like maybe you should think, oh, look at around you. That's why you are here. What are your thoughts on this?
I think when I was younger, I was very performance focused. Like when I started doing it, no one was using power meters. I was using power meters, like just little things like that, right? But we are incredibly lucky to be able to travel and see these countries in a way that very few people do get that opportunity to, right? And I think that I'm never taken away from the performance aspect of the people that win or come in the top 5 or top 10. It's incredible. Like I've been there, I've done that. It's an incredible thing to do that and to achieve that. And it's a real sporting feat. Never going to take away from that. But especially if you are not in a position where you can do something like this a couple of times a year, right? And it's your holiday. Enjoy that experience and see the country, meet the people, interact with locals. You will gain so much more from that for your own growth as a person than you would, burying yourself riding through the night. I have this, like, one of the rules that I have, and I've had it for a few years after some silly crashes, basically, is any event, if I make 3 silly mistakes, and what I class as a silly mistake is like a little slip, like, having to unclip to put your foot down, like they're silly mistakes. If I do 3 of them in a row, I need to sleep. That's been my rule for the last few years. And it's meant that I've still ridden at night and through the nights, but it's changed my mindset of going, actually, this is an experience that when I'm older, I can look back on and remember parts of it, those interactions, those conversations, and those moments of meeting people that we come from completely different lifestyles and completely different backgrounds. Doesn't matter where in the world, but so opposite to what, my upbringing and how I was raised. And they ultimately make you a better person by having those interactions. And I think I'm always incredibly impressed by the people that, are winning stuff in however many days it is or whatever it is now. Like, I'm always so impressed by it. But I think what was very true to ultra events is the exploration thing. And it's very important that we don't lose that. I've already said it, we're so lucky, us who have been able to travel, to be able to do that. And it is a real privilege. And you need to relish in that and interact and share those moments with people.
Indeed.
I just believe it makes you a better person, to be honest with you.
Yeah, and based on your experience, I mean, you've done so many long distance events and challenges. What are 5 things you wish you knew when you started long distance cycling?
5 things I wish I knew. First thing I wish I knew was it's not a race, it's an adventure. That's number 1, because I was always racing. And then I think especially after a couple of bad injuries, my mindset definitely changed. I guess the next one probably is be efficient. Like, efficiency is king. So what I mean, like, the faff is the enemy, effectively. So what I mean by that is, like, I on trips and stuff where I've been with, like, friends, like, certain friends are really efficient, but then, like, that, which is great because it means you're on the road sooner. But what I mean by faff being the enemy is, like, you stop, you sit, you eat some food in a place, you then sit around for 10 minutes, you sit and scroll on your phone. So then suddenly an hour's gone, when in reality you could be in eating and out, like eat on the bike, for example. Like, there's ways of being more efficient. And it does relate to that. What are your goals for the event? Are you there for the adventure, or are you there for the race as such, right? And if you're there for the adventure, yes, having that, like, maybe half an hour or so to meet and interact with locals is incredibly valuable. But if you're there to try and push yourself as well, remember that faff is the enemy. Always remember that. Like, faff is going to be your biggest enemy. I guess the third one will be hygiene is key. I'm not in the game of like I've seen firsthand horrible things where people have not been looking after themselves, and then it's meant that they're in hospital, right? I don't want to go too heavily into it, but I'm talking saddle sores, dental things, that kind of stuff. Like, I take an electric toothbrush on almost every single event I do.
Really?
And I don't care if that's fancy as hell. I don't care that it's heavy.
I was about to say heavy.
I really care about my teeth. You've only got one set of teeth. I've had several knocked out from when I played rugby. It's really expensive to go to the dentist. So I really care about my teeth. And I don't care if that sounds stupid. You've only got one set and you've got to look after them. And the other side of it for me is, like, for me personally, brushing my teeth wakes me up. So it's like a refresh and a reset. And an electric toothbrush, I know everyone goes on about, like, chopping down toothbrushes and stuff. Like, honestly, it's a couple of grams, really. A loaded bike is heavy. That's number 4. A loaded bike is heavy. Don't weigh it. Just accept it. Like, it doesn't matter. Like,
my weight weenie.
if you're into weight weenie stuff, go and do hill climbs in the UK. That's a massive. We've just had the national champs here, and it was one on a 16-year-old bike this year that's covered in graffiti and says "fuck the UCI." Excuse my swearing, but it says it on it. But I guess the fourth one really is like, don't stress about the weight. Like, you get people that are like, oh, how much does the setup weigh? You've got your setup that works for you. It doesn't matter if you've got more or less than someone else. A heavy bike is just heavy. It doesn't matter. Like, your bike could weigh 10 kilos. It could weigh 50 kilos, right? It's just heavy. It doesn't matter on the weight. It's just heavy. So as long as you've got what works for you, it really doesn't matter what works for someone else. Like, everyone has their own creature comforts. Like I said about having an electric toothbrush, like that's the thing I always take. I always take earplugs. I always take an eye mask. I always take an electric toothbrush. The other thing that I learned the hard way, and it does, I guess it kind of relates to hygiene, so I'm kind of classing this in that one as well, is just take 2 pairs of shorts.
Oh yeah, that's my luxury item.
Yeah. I've done races where I've taken 1 pair of shorts and I've regretted it. So just always, they're not heavy. Same thing, doesn't weigh a lot. They fold up pretty small. Just take 2 pairs of shorts. And I guess the fifth one, the last one for me, is don't take it too seriously, because I definitely was a person that took it very seriously when I was younger, and ultimately it shouldn't be serious. It should be about problem solving. It should be fun. It should be about adventure. I think if you take it too seriously, the moment something doesn't go to plan, a lot of people will just lose their head.
Yeah.
So actually remind yourself that it's a privilege to do this kind of thing, and we're seeing parts of the world that other people might not have seen. You're interacting with people that you probably would never meet in your day-to-day life, and so just don't take it seriously and enjoy the journey.
Yeah, I think that's really good. You always have to go in this reset moment. I always tell myself, like, it's the adventure no matter what. So otherwise, I just go into my bikepacking mode, let's say. And it adds to the experience. It's a different experience. And talking about setups, you were talking about bikes, and I've seen you use sometimes for events a gravel bike and sometimes a drop bar mountain bike. Why is that? And which one? You think, for example, in Badlands and Atlas, I think you did that. Why is that? You like kind of having the position of the drop bar and then the comfort of a mountain bike?
So
Or why a gravel one?
I did Badlands last year on a drop bar hardtail, and that was I broke both of my wrists last year. I had a pretty bad crash, went over the handlebars, put my wrists down, broken both. There's one broken bone in my right, 3 broken bones in my left. So this left hand is just knackered now, basically. So to try and get cycling again, I was riding a mountain bike quite a lot. Higher position, big tires, suspension. But the flat bars, I couldn't get on with the broken wrists. Like, it was really painful. So I saw that, like, I did see, like, John Tomac, who's like a mountain biker from the 80s, 90s, really famous guy for pioneering change in mountain biking. He was mountain biking on Yetis, and he had a drop bar Yeti, and he had like a disc wheel on one of them. Like, just check out John Tomac, like, coolest, just cool. And I used to watch a lot of mountain biking when I was a kid, and so John Tomac was one of those guys that was a bit of a hero, really, because he was doing things a bit different. And I had a weird idea about putting drop bars on the hardtail. I was like, obviously you have to bear in mind you have to accommodate your position into that, because it's very different. A mountain bike's normally quite long, so you need to put on a shorter stem, and like then you had to think, oh, I've got the hoods on it, so that actually extends it forward, so you end up with a really tiny stem on these bikes. But I basically wanted to have a bike that was as comfortable as possible for me with broken wrists. The recovery time for broken wrists is generally a year. I broke them in March last year, and Badlands last year was September, so it's well under a year. And I've subsequently had an operation on them since then, so then the recovery period has been extended even further. But the the big thing for me was allowing myself to have as much comfort as possible to allow me to do something like Badlands, and then Le Pilgrimage, which is an event that's run by some friends, and a few other
Really
bits and
nice.
bobs. Yeah, so for me, the drop bar hardtail was basically a way of allowing me to do stuff while I was still recovering. Gravel bikes, I've done Badlands on a different bike every year, and I will say I think it is a gravel bike race. I do think a gravel bike is the right bike for it. I think, though, it depends on your tire clearance and the bike itself. Previously, before the drop bar hardtail, I rode a very, very stiff racy gravel bike, and that probably isn't the bike for Badlands, actually. Great bike, but it's just really stiff. So my body felt like it'd just been shaken up throughout the whole thing. And this year I was on a more, I guess, adventure-focused gravel bike, bigger tire clearance, 45mm tire clearance, and it felt like a good mix between the two. Actually, the one I was on this year, even though I didn't finish, it felt closer to a hardtail than a road bike, I would say. So I think for an event, if we say Badlands or Gran Guanche, ones that are tracker even, events that are kind of listed as gravel events. In my mind, a gravel bike with a minimum of 45mm tire, if you can fit bigger, great. Biggest tires you can fit on the bike is always going to be the answer. And then potentially some form of suspension or compliance, whether that's like a suspension stem, like Redshift do, or whether that is just accommodating into a handlebar that has some good flex in it. So the bars I'm using at the moment have a really nice amount of flex in them. So actually it kind of helps to take out a lot of the vibration of the road. And then the bike I'm on at the moment has a curved fork, which same thing helps a lot with comfort and absorbing a lot of the vibration. So for me, for those kind of events, a gravel bike is 100% the bike you should be using. Just get the biggest tire clearance, the better, effectively. Move away from what I would class as a racing gravel bike and look at the adventure gravel bike side of it. If you want a racing gravel bike, that to me is something which you'd use for things like the Gravel Earth series, the UCI gravel races. There definitely is this starting to be this differentiation. I don't even know if that's the right word. There's a difference. That sounds easy to say. There really is starting to be a difference in gravel bikes now, which is great, and it needs to be that way, because ultimately you can do a thing like Badlands on a really racy gravel bike. You can do it, but you're going to be pretty shaken up at the end of it. Or you could do it on something that's a bit more comfortable, and you're probably not going to be much. If anything, you might be faster, because comfort is fast in ultras, right? So you might even be faster, and you'll probably enjoy it better. And I think that separation is really good. It's we've seen it in road cycling, right? Aero bikes, lightweight bikes, endurance bikes. We've seen it in road cycling. We'll start to see it in gravel cycling as well, which I think is a really good thing. It's still a relatively new market. Like gravel bikes, when I did the first Silk Road, no one really knew what a gravel bike was. It was kind of cyclocross. It was basically cyclocross bike, mountain bike. I would say, though, that if you're looking at events like Silk Road Mountain Race, Atlas Mountain Race, Hellenic Mountain Race, I'm just listing Nelson's races, basically. The fourth mountain race, which is coming, that no one really knows that much about.
That's intriguing,
Yeah, I've been trying to get it out of him, but he won't tell me. He was like it. The Hellenic one, going on a tangent, I was in Greece at the time when he was planning that route. And I said, he messaged me. I've known Nelson for a long time. He's a good friend, and he's a funny guy. And I messaged him. He messaged me rather, and I was on holiday in Greece, and I was like, "Oh," he's like, "What do you think of it, like as a country?" And I was like, "It's an amazing country. Love Greece, incredible country, amazing food, like amazing riding." And he's like, "Yeah, the off road's pretty good, isn't it?" And I was like, "Yeah, what are you thinking?" And he's like, and he just was like, "Oh, nothing at all, mate." And then about a week later, Hellenic was announced. But anyway, for like Nelson's races, which are originally maybe were listed as gravel races. They really are mountain bike races. And you could argue putting drop bars on a mountain bike will work fine. And I probably would ride a drop bar mountain bike at one of his races. And for me personally, that's because I prefer that position of being on a drop bars. It's more natural to me. It doesn't hurt my wrists as much. But there are ways, if you are riding a mountain bike, you can accommodate that kind of position to feel it. So I've got a full suspension mountain bike. I love mountain biking. I've always loved it. I have a full suspension cross country bike, which is great fun. And you can get these little things from a company called SQ Labs, which they're like little bar end things. So and you could put them inside, like kind of inside your brake calipers, so you can use them, your hands like that, and you can still brake. Now they give you that position of being on a drop bar. So you've got the control of having the flat bar, you've got the position of being able to sit like that, which might be more comfortable for your wrists, and then clip on bars on it, and it gives you, so many different hand positions.
I'm building the drop bar mountain bike. What considerations you had? I mean, I'm building one. I got a frame from Bike Ahead Composite, and then I sorting out all the parts. But I struggle a bit with all the standards. It's like I thought it would be more straightforward, but there's not much information out there on how actually do I build something like that. Hardtail. Yeah.
Okay, so the biggest. So I rode 140. Well, sorry, let me get that right. What did I ride? 140 mil travel forks, which is quite a lot on mine. Yeah. I think realistically 100 to 120 mil travel forks is what you want.
Yeah.
There generally most mountain bikes now will be a boost standard, which is to do with the spacing on the hubs. But if I was to do it now, so mine I built up with Shimano GRX, but I used a GRX shifters, Di2 shifters, 11 speed. This is where it all gets confusing. I used an XTR 12 speed crankset because I had it as a hardtail and I already have the crank. And I also think the XTR crank is a really beautiful crank. I think it's the nicest looking crank that Shimano makes currently, personally. So I'm obviously aesthetics is 90% of cycling.
Of course, it needs to be fancy.
Yeah, but then and then on the rear, I used 11-speed XTR Di2 rear mech. Now these things are like unicorn poop. They're really hard to find now, but they work absolutely fine with the GRX 11-speed shifters, and the XTR rear mech had a bigger cassette clearance than the GRX 11-speed rear mech, so you could comfortably fit a 46 tooth mech on it. 46 tooth chainring. Wait, let me get it right. A 46 tooth cassette. There we go. Get there eventually. The bits where it all gets tricky, depending whether you're going down the route of Shimano or SRAM, is anyway, that setup worked absolutely fine for me. I used XTR 2-pot brakes. So you have 2-pot and 4-pot, which is to do with the amount of pistons in the brakes.
The brakes, I'm struggling with that.
So I would fit mountain bike brakes and then cable it up with the mountain bike brake caliper will work absolutely fine with a drop bar like lever. It works absolutely fine. So the reason why I used XTR 2-pot ones is I did not need the braking performance of 4-pot. So 4-pot is twice the braking performance, really, and that's kind of the sort of stuff you'd need for proper downhill mountain biking. You don't really need it for a drop bar mountain bike build, in my opinion. You could use it, but I don't think you need to. And then I rode a 180 rotor on the front and a 160 rotor on the back, and that was basically the Fox fork that I used. It was set up to work with 180, so that was easy. And then the frame worked with a 160 on the back, so biggest rotors that I could fit on it. It worked really well. I think if you were to do it with SRAM, it's probably easier now because it's wireless. You don't need to worry about the wiring for the shifters, and you'd be able to use their is it Eagle or GX system?
Yeah, that's what I was planning. The Eagle.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
don't know SRAM's setups that well, but I think if I was to do it now, I would probably do it looking at SRAM system. So I would basically use the mountain bike gearing, like cassette, rear
Yeah.
mech, chain
You
rings.
definitely want that for the mountain races.
Yeah, and it's what, a
For what I've
50,
seen.
51, 52 cassette? 100%
Yeah.
use that. And then like a 30 or a 32 on the front. So something really small.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think you can use the red or the force or even the rival shifters will work absolutely fine because it all syncs up really well.
Yeah.
My only thing was then the brake calipers would be to make sure you use a mountain bike brake caliper, not a road or gravel bike brake caliper, because it'll be the right like sizing and spacing and stuff for a mountain bike frame. It does take a bit of like juggling and thinking through,
Yeah.
but that's I find that really exciting personally. I really like
Yeah.
that side of cycling. I
Yeah.
don't think you can make it work with a cable group set. I think it needs to be an electronic group set. There probably are ways to do it with a cable group set, but I think it's more of a pain in the ass.
Yeah, exactly. I think one of the things that for me keeps ultra interesting is like, I don't know, I change something in my setup every week. I think I'm always
Yeah.
like, oh, maybe a mount, a screw there, maybe if keeps it interesting because not every race is the same, and as you said, not the same setup works for everybody. So it's quite nice to see the creative solutions that people come up with. And Chris, I wanted to jump into the questions that the audience have for you.
Oh God.
Let's start. Okay, the first one. What is your age? To be honest, when I Google your name, that was one of the first things Google come up with. Also,
What, my age?
yeah,
Uh,
people ask what's Chris Hall's age.
my mate, one of my really good mates, said to me that the other week we were out at like a really fancy event in Ibiza, which was mental. But he said to me, "Your age ambiguous," and I thought that was a really weird thing to say. And I said to him, I was like, "What do you mean by that?" And he was like, "When you have a beard, like a full beard, you're 40. You're in your 40s, right?
Yeah.
When you're clean shaven, you're in your 20s." And he's like, "When you've got a moustache, you're kind of your age." So I'm 34, nearly
Yeah.
35.
Yeah.
But I very intentionally don't have a beard so much anymore because it's very grey. And the moustache was a joke from 2019 that's kind of stuck around. Committed to it. So yeah, 34, 35 in a
Yeah.
couple of months.
Why Argon 18 frames?
So I did previously work with Cervelo for 4 or 5 years, which was amazing. We had a fantastic relationship and an agreement. But I got to a point where I wanted to ride something different. It's nothing against Cervelo at all. They make fantastic bikes. But maybe they're very race focused, and that started, especially with the broken wrists, became a thing that was quite tricky in terms of comfort. So I switched to Argon 18 this year for a few reasons. I've always really respected the brand. They have a very good history of very well engineered and very well designed bikes. And one of my best friends has raved about them for a long time. He buys them. He loves them. He's got a 10-year-old time trial bike from them, for example.
Yeah.
So the switch was kind of when I decided to sort of part with Cervelos, it was kind of a mutual agreement. I wanted to work with a brand that had a very good and growing interest and understanding in ultracycling and long distance. And as I've previously mentioned, Mark Beaumont is a friend of mine, and he's been quite involved with Argon 18 and the development of the Krypton and the Krypton Pro, which is their like all-road bike. And the first time I saw it was in Austria. Mark and I were riding in Austria, and we were doing a gravel event together. He was riding the Krypton, which is an all-road bike, but he was riding it like on some pretty gnarly gravel, and I was riding on my drop bar hardtail at the time, which I thought was actually kind of the right bike for it. But he proved to me actually how versatile that bike was using it at that event. so the big reason for the change was wanting to work with a brand that has a invested interest in long distance riding, adventuring, and exploring, as well as a brand that has a really good history of designing very well engineered and thought through bikes. Like, I'm a bike geek. I like that kind of stuff. I love talking about that kind of thing. And we had our first introduction with each other, and we just you could tell there was something was right. There was a connection that went very well, very quickly. The product manager and the head of marketing are very into exploring on bike and ultracycling, and so we just clicked really, really well. Nice. And then for me, I wanted to test ride anything. I didn't want to agree to anything before test riding it, and so I borrowed a Krypton, which is their all-road bike. It's got tire clearance for 40mm tires. You could use it as a grab bike you wanted. And I test rode it, and I was like, damn, this is cool. Like, it ticked a lot of boxes for me what I would be looking for a bike. Threaded bottom bracket, frame storage, big tire clearance, mudguard mounts. I live in the UK. These kind of things are all things that are really practical and logical to me. And that kind of, that sort of, for me, having ridden that bike, I kind of went, yeah, actually this feels like a really good relationship. And it so far has been a great relationship. And we're working on some exciting stuff going forward in the next year or so, which I'm buzzing about.
Oh, that's really cool. Next one. Somebody's asking if you recommend the GOATS race. You did it recently in Portugal. How was it? That's also linked with another question.
Did is a loose term. I did not do it. I did turn up. I had a really, so Edgar, who is the organizer for that, I would very much say now is a friend. Really, really lovely guy. The GOATS, I had plans to do it, but I was still really struggling post heat stroke. And so one of my bestest friends is also my coach, and he's coached me for, coming up for 10 years now.
Oh, wow.
And he said to me, I think it would be a really stupid idea to do that, Chris. And I was like, but I've booked the flights, I booked everything. And he was like, well, go to Portugal and go and explore and maybe ride a few bits of the route and meet the people and hang out and help out. And I was like, okay, that's a good point. I can go and do that. And I think actually maybe it was a bit of a blessing in disguise, because the weather conditions this year at that event were really, really bad.
I wanted to do it, but I was imagining sunshine. In my head.
Well, they are going to. Edgar is going to be moving the event to, I think, June next year. So the weather conditions should be better. It was very weird that the weather was as bad as it was for this edition. Yeah, for Portugal at this time of year, it's unseasonably bad. But I would really like to go back and do it. I feel a bit gutted that I didn't do it, but it was as I said, as I've already mentioned several times, long-term health is way more important than an event, right? And I still got to go out there, meet people doing it, and get a feel for it. And the vibe is really good. It feels really good. It's very, very relaxed, and that's quite nice. Feels like there's not a huge amount of pressure with it, and everyone there is just there to have a good time. Even though the conditions were pretty shocking, I'm in the WhatsApp group still for the event, and everyone's just everyone was just really positive about it, even though it was raining for the whole thing. And it wasn't just a little bit of rain; it was thunderstorms and hail rain. So,
and the other question: would you be back to Badlands 2025?
Probably. So, Badlands 2025. So one of my very good friends, it's his 40th birthday next year, and he's rinsing it by doing as many different things for his 40th birthday. And he wants to do Badlands for his 40th birthday. He's never done something like this. And Jack, who's helped me film Badlands for the last 3 editions, has, Jack is an incredibly talented wildlife photographer and videographer. He's an amazing storyteller. I'm very lucky to work with him and call him a good friend as well. Now, he wants to do it. My friend Corey wants to do it for his birthday. And so basically it's looking likely that there's 4 of us that will do it as 2 pairs and then kind of ride it as a bunch of mates as an adventure. So I will probably be back. I probably won't be racing it as such. I'm probably going to be doing it as an adventure thing. I would like to have that moment of enjoying it with my friends, to be totally honest. But I am very open about the idea of trying to do it every year if I can. I love the event. I love the organizers. I love the people.
Yeah, that's great. And another one, which countries you haven't ridden yet and are on your bucket list?
Oh man,
Top one?
New Zealand, actually, and I'm going to tick that off next year because I'm going on holiday there.
Oh, that's amazing! Yeah,
but New Zealand is really high on that list, and I would love to do some of South America. I've never been to South. Well, I don't know whether you do or don't class Mexico as South America. I don't really know.
Central America,
Central America, right?
Yeah.
So I've been to Mexico. I've never ridden in Mexico. I've been like backpacking across Mexico when I was 18. But I would love to ride in South America, like across many different countries to explore more of there. I just get a really cool vibe from
it's
everywhere.
Really amazing.
You're biased, right?
Yeah, I'm biased. Go visit Colombia.
Yeah, Colombia is well on my list. Peru's on my list.
Yeah.
I would really love to go to South America and explore several countries and like do some like just a bikepacking trip with mates. Really.
Yeah.
Across Andes has continually been an event on my radar to do, and then it's just not quite worked out every year. It's a tricky time of year, the end of the year for me, because it's like I've got a lot of family birthdays, my birthday. It's always a bit tricky the end of the year, and I'm normally pretty burnt out. But Across Andes is up there, something I'd like to do at some point. But yeah, South America, New Zealand. I'd love to do some more riding in Africa. I was listening to a fascinating podcast this week about a guy that basically rode from London to South Africa and the countries he explored through. And it sounds amazing, like as an incredible place to explore. I've only really in Africa been to Morocco, and Morocco and Tunisia. That's it. So there's thousands of, well, not thousands, there's loads of countries in Africa which are so diverse and unique and individual that I'd love to go and explore. And I'm quite interested by the fact that we've got the UCI World Championships in Rwanda in 2025.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. So that would be quite.
That's really cool.
It's the first time it's ever been to Africa. I think maybe people thought maybe it's been in South Africa before, but no, never been to the African continent. Sorry. So there's still a lot of the world I haven't been to, but I think New Zealand, South America, and Africa are kind of the places that I'm excited by. Rwanda, I'd love to go ride there, definitely.
Oh wow, that's great. Well, that leads us to the end of the show. Thank you so much for sharing all your knowledge, insights. I'm really excited to see what's next for you. So for the listeners, stay tuned to Chris' whole channel. I guess you will upload some nice videos from your adventures there.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, we'll see. I don't know whether they'll be nice, but they'll be there.
So make sure to check them out. Thank you so much for joining us, Chris.
Thank you very much. It's I love talking about bikes, so thanks for indulging me to talk about bikes for an hour and a bit.
Thanks for joining us. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell button below if you are watching on YouTube, and to rate the show if you're listening in Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Until the next one.